The gunshot echoed across the Montana plains as Zachariah Wilson slumped to the ground, blood pooling beneath him in the dusty street of Silver Creek. Zara Keller screamed, the sound tearing from her throat as she watched her father fall, his body still and broken in the harsh afternoon sun. The year was 1878, and in that moment, everything she had built her life upon shattered like glass. 3 days later, Zara found herself running. Her boots pounded against the hard, packed earth as she fled from the town that had taken everything from her. Her father's mercantile business, her home, her reputation all gone in the wake of false accusations and the greedy machinations of Mayor Thornton and his cronies. They had framed her father for theft, shot him dead when he protested his innocence, and were now coming after her with claims that she was complicit in his crimes. The creek appeared before her like salvation, its gentle babbling a stark contrast to her ragged breathing and racing heart. She collapsed at its edge, her dark hair falling in disarray around her shoulders as the tears finally came. For days, she had been strong packing what little she could carry, evading the sheriff's men, planning her escape. Now, alone with nothing but the sound of running water and distant birdsong, Zara broke. She didn't hear the approach of hoofbeats over her sobs, didn't notice the tall figure dismounting nearby until a shadow fell across her huddled form. "Miss, are you hurt?" Zara's head snapped up, fear instantly replacing grief as her hand moved to the small revolver concealed in her skirts, the only thing she had managed to grab from her father's belongings before fleeing. The man before her took a step back, hands raised slightly. "I mean no harm." He was tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of whiskey. His clothes were trail-worn but well-kept faded denim, a button-up shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows, and a weathered leather vest. The gun belt at his hips looked well used, but it remained buckled, his hands carefully away from the weapon. "Leave me be," Zara managed, her voice hoarse from crying. Instead, the stranger crouched down several feet away, respectful of her space. "Name's Henry Rowe," he said quietly. "I've got coffee brewing at my camp just up the ridge. You look like you could use some." "I don't need your charity," Zara spat, wiping roughly at her tears, embarrassed to be caught in such a vulnerable state. Something in his expression softened. "You don't owe anyone your strength," he said simply. "Not me, not yourself, not whoever you're running from." His words struck her like a physical blow, piercing through the armor she had constructed around herself since watching her father die. Fresh tears welled in her eyes and she turned away, unable to face this stranger's kindness when her world had become so cruel. Henry remained silent, patient. When she finally looked back at him, he offered a small, gentle smile. "The coffee's hot, and I've got beans and bacon. No strings attached. You can be on your way after if that's what you want." Hunger gnawed at Zara's stomach. She hadn't eaten properly in days, and exhaustion weighed on her like a physical burden. Against her better judgment, she nodded once. "Thank you," she whispered. As the sun began to dip below the distant mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Zara found herself seated beside a small campfire, a tin cup of strong coffee warming her hands. The stranger Henry moved efficiently around the camp, tending to his horse, a magnificent chestnut gelding, before returning to the fire to check the beans simmering in a cast iron pot. "Been on the trail long?" he asked, his tone conversational rather than probing. Zara hesitated. 3 days, she admitted finally, seeing no reason to lie about that particular detail. Henry nodded, as if 3 days was perfectly reasonable for a woman to be wandering alone in the wilderness. "Heading anywhere in particular?" "West," Zara replied vaguely. Her plan, such as it was, involved reaching the next territory where Thornton's influence couldn't follow. Beyond that, she had no clear direction. "That's a lot of West out there," Henry remarked, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. He dished up a plate of beans and bacon, passing it to her with a spare fork. "Careful, it's hot." The food was simple but delicious, and Zara found herself devouring it with an enthusiasm that would have scandalized her former self. The Zara from a week ago would never have imagined sharing a meal with a strange man at a campfire in the wilderness, but that Zara had died alongside her father in the street. "Thank you," she said when she had finished, setting the empty plate aside. "For the food and for earlier, at the creek." Henry shrugged, his gaze fixed on the fire. "No thanks needed. I've had my share of dark days." He glanced up, meeting her eyes. "Whatever you're running from, I'm not one to judge." Zara stiffened, her guard instantly back in place. "What makes you think I'm running?" A sad smile crossed his face. "Most folks don't end up crying by creeks in the middle of nowhere unless they're running to or from something." He set his own empty plate down. "And you've got that look in your eyes. I've seen it before." "What look?" she challenged, discomfort making her voice sharper than intended. "Like you've lost everything but you're still standing. It's a hard look to wear." His perceptiveness was unnerving. Zara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the fire's warmth. "My father was murdered," she found herself saying, the words escaping before she could stop them. 3 days ago. They said he was a thief, but it was a lie. The mayor wanted his store, his land, when my father refused to sell." Her voice broke. Henry's expression darkened. "And now they're after you too," she nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "Silver Creek?" he asked quietly. Zara's head snapped up. "How did you—" "Thornton has a reputation," Henry said grimly. "It's not the first time he's done something like this. You know of him." Hope sparked in Zara's chest for the first time in days. Henry nodded, his jaw tight. "I've had some dealings with him and his kind before." He poked at the fire, sending sparks dancing into the darkening sky. "Where are you headed now?" "Away," Zara admitted. "I didn't have much of a plan beyond getting out of his reach." "And what then? Once you're away," the question hung between them, heavy with implications. Zara had no answer. In the chaos of the past few days, survival had been her only focus. "I don't know," she whispered. Henry was quiet for a long moment, studying her across the flames. "I'm heading to a place called Willow Springs," he finally said. "It's a small ranch about 3 days' ride from here. My friend owns it, good man, fair. He could use help for the season, and no one there would ask questions about where you came from." Zara regarded him suspiciously. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Something flickered in Henry's eyes, pain, perhaps, or memory. "Let's just say I know what it's like to lose everything and have nowhere to go." He cleared his throat. "The offer stands. You can ride with me to Willow Springs, get your bearings, figure out your next move, or we part ways in the morning, no hard feelings." The proposal was tempting, desperately so. Alone, Zara's chances of making it safely to another territory were slim. She had limited supplies, little money, and no knowledge of the wilderness. But trusting this stranger, this Henry Rowe, was a risk in itself. "How do I know I can trust you?" she asked bluntly. Henry laughed, the sound warm and unexpectedly genuine. "You don't," he admitted. "Just like I don't know if I can trust you. For all I know, you could slit my throat in my sleep and steal my horse." His expression sobered. "But sometimes, Miss Zara," she supplied, surprising herself. "Zara Keller. Sometimes, Zara Keller, trust is all we've got left when everything else is gone." As darkness settled fully over the land, Zara made her decision. "I'll go with you to Willow Springs," she said quietly. "But just until I can get my bearings." Henry nodded, pouring them both more coffee. That's fair enough. Morning came with a chill that made Zara burrow deeper into the borrowed blanket. She had slept fitfully, waking at every sound, her hand never far from her father's revolver. But Henry had kept his distance, sleeping on the opposite side of the now extinguished fire, respectful of her wariness. She watched him now as he moved about the camp with practiced efficiency, saddling his horse and packing their few supplies. There was something reassuring in his methodical movements, in the quiet confidence with which he navigated the wilderness. "We should reach the Macpherson homestead by nightfall," Henry said, noticing she was awake. "Silas and Martha are good people. They'll give us a hot meal and a place to sleep before we continue on tomorrow." Zara sat up, combing her fingers through her tangled hair. "You seem to know a lot of people around these parts." Henry handed her a cup of fresh coffee. "Been working this territory for a few years now." "Cattle drives mostly, some ranch work in between." "You're a cowhand?" Zara asked, accepting the cup gratefully. "Among other things," he replied with a small smile. "I go where the work takes me." As they prepared to leave, Zara faced a practical problem. "I can't ride astride in these skirts," she said, eyeing the chestnut gelding dubiously. Henry considered for a moment, then reached into one of his saddlebags, pulling out a pair of worn denim trousers. "These might be a bit large, but they'll do for riding. There's a stand of trees over there for privacy." At her startled expression, he added, "Practicality over propriety out here, Miss Keller, though I've got a length of rope we can use as a belt." The pants were indeed too large, but with the rope cinched around her waist and the cuffs rolled up several times, they would serve. Zara emerged from the trees feeling strangely liberated, her divided skirt left behind among the supplies. It was scandalous by town standards, but Henry merely nodded in approval. "You'll be more comfortable for the ride," was all he said, offering his hand to help her mount behind him. The day passed in a rhythm of hoofbeats and shared silence. Henry wasn't one for idle chatter, which suited Zara fine. Her mind was still processing the rapid upheaval of her life, grief and anger alternating like waves within her. Around midday, they stopped to rest the horse and eat a simple lunch of jerky and hardtack. Seated on a fallen log, Zara found herself studying her unlikely companion. "You said you've had dealings with Thornton before," she ventured. "What kind of dealings?" Henry's expression darkened momentarily. "The kind that left me with a scar on my back and him with a warning to stay out of my way. He doesn't seem the type to heed warnings." "No," Henry agreed, "he's not, but I made it clear that the next time wouldn't end with just a warning." His tone was matter-of-fact, without bravado. Zara considered this. "My father wasn't a violent man," she said softly. "He believed in the law and justice. He thought the truth would protect him." Henry met her gaze, his eyes solemn. "The truth only protects those with the power to enforce it. Then what chance do I have?" The question escaped before she could stop it, vulnerable and raw. "You survived," Henry said simply. "You're still fighting. That's a start." They continued their journey, the landscape gradually changing from open plains to rolling hills dotted with pine and aspen. As the afternoon waned, Zara found herself relaxing incrementally against Henry's back, her initial tension giving way to exhaustion. The steady rhythm of the horse's gait and the solid warmth of the man before her lulled her into a state of near sleep. She jerked awake when Henry reined in suddenly, his body tensing. "What is it?" she whispered, instantly alert. Henry's hand moved to his pistol, eyes scanning the tree line ahead. "Not sure, thought I saw movement." He whistled softly and the horse's ears pricked forward, but the animal showed no signs of distress. After a tense moment, Henry relaxed slightly. "Probably just wildlife, but we should be careful approaching the homestead." The caution proved unnecessary. The MacPherson place appeared as the sun began its descent, a tidy cabin with smoke curling from the chimney, a small barn and neat fields beyond. A woman emerged at the sound of their approach, wiping her hands on her apron, a smile breaking across her weathered face. "Henry Rowe. Well, I'll be. Silas said you might be passing through this season." Her gaze shifted to Zara, curiosity evident but tempered with kindness. "And you've brought company." "Martha," Henry greeted, dismounting and helping Zara down. "This is Zara Keller. We're on our way to Willow Springs." Martha's eyes widened slightly at Zara's attire, but recovered quickly. "Any friend of Henry's is welcome here. Come in, both of you. Supper's almost ready, and Silas will be back from the field soon." The inside of the cabin was warm and inviting, smelling of fresh bread and stew. Martha bustled about, setting an extra plate and cup, asking questions about their journey but tactfully avoiding inquiring about the circumstances that had brought them together. "You can wash up there," she told Zara, pointing to a basin of water in the corner. "And I've got a spare nightgown you can borrow. We're of a similar size, I think." The simple kindness nearly undid Zara. She had spent so long being strong, fighting back tears and fear, that this casual hospitality threatened to crack her carefully maintained facade. Martha seemed to sense her struggle. "Henry, why don't you go see if Silas needs help bringing in the horses? I'll help Miss Keller get settled." Once Henry had departed, Martha turned to Zara with gentle eyes. "Whatever's happened, you're safe here for tonight. We don't ask questions of those passing through, but if there's anything you need, anything at all, you just say the word." Zara nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Martha patted her hand once, then moved back to the stove, allowing Zara the dignity of composing herself in private. Dinner that night was a revelation. Silas MacPherson proved to be as welcoming as his wife, a gruff but kind-hearted man who treated Henry like a son and extended that warmth to Zara without hesitation. The conversation flowed easily, focusing on cattle prices, the summer's rainfall, and news from neighboring homesteads. No one asked why Zara was traveling with Henry or where they had come from. It was as if they understood instinctively that some stories weren't theirs to probe. After the meal, while Martha and Zara washed dishes, Silas and Henry stepped outside to smoke pipes and discuss the route ahead. Through the window, Zara could see them talking, their expressions serious in the gathering darkness. "Henry's a good man," Martha said, following her gaze. "Best I've known, save for my Silas." "You've known him long?" Zara asked, curious despite herself. Martha nodded, drying a plate with practiced movements. "Going on 5 years now. He helped Silas when a flash flood nearly took our livestock. Stayed for weeks, rebuilding fences, rounding up strays. Wouldn't take more than a hot meal and a place to sleep as payment." She set the plate down, her expression thoughtful. "He carries his burdens quietly, that one, but he's got a good heart." Later that night, lying on a pallet in the small room Martha had prepared for her, Zara found herself wondering about those burdens. What had shaped the quiet cowboy who had found her by the creek? What demons drove him to wander, never settling in one place for long? The questions followed her into uneasy dreams, where her father's face merged with Henry's, both warning her of dangers she couldn't quite see. Dawn broke clear and cool, the promise of another fine day for traveling. Zara rose early, borrowing a comb from Martha to tame her hair before braiding it securely. She had slept better than expected, the safety of the MacPherson home providing a respite from the constant vigilance of the past few days. In the kitchen, she found Henry already at the table, nursing a cup of coffee while Martha prepared breakfast. He looked up as she entered, something flickering in his eyes before he nodded in greeting. "Morning," he said simply. "Good morning," Zara replied, accepting the cup Martha handed her. "Thank you for the use of your nightgown, Mrs. Macpherson, and for the bed." "Martha, please," the older woman insisted. "And it was no trouble at all. I've laid out some things for you in the bedroom, nothing fancy, just some practical items for the journey ahead." Zara returned to the small room to find a bundle on the bed. A shirt that had been altered to better fit a woman's frame, a kerchief to protect her neck from the sun, and a wide-brimmed hat that had seen better days but would serve its purpose well. "I can't accept these," Zara protested when she returned to the kitchen, the bundle in her arms. Martha waved away her objections. "Nonsense! They're just gathering dust here, and you'll need them more than I do. Consider it payment for the pleasure of your company." After a breakfast of eggs, bacon, and fresh bread, they prepared to depart. Silas presented Henry with a small sack of provisions, jerky, hardtack, and a jar of preserved peaches that Martha insisted they take. The older couple's generosity was overwhelming, especially to Zara, who had become accustomed to suspicion and hostility in the days following her father's death. As they mounted up Henry again in front, Zara behind Martha pressed a small package into Zara's hand. "For later," she whispered with a wink. They rode away from the homestead with promises to stop by on their return journey, though Zara wondered silently if she would ever pass this way again. Her future remained as uncertain as the vast sky above them. "Good people," Henry commented as the Macpherson place disappeared behind a rise. "Yes," Zara agreed, her throat tight with emotion. "I've almost forgotten what that feels like." Henry was quiet for a moment. "Not everyone is like Thornton," he said finally. "There are still decent folks in this world, though sometimes they are harder to find." "And which are you?" The question slipped out before Zara could stop it. Henry chuckled, the sound vibrating through his back against her chest. "I'm just a man trying to get by, Miss Keller." "No better or worse than most." The day's journey took them through increasingly rugged terrain, winding through valleys and alongside streams that cut through the landscape like silver ribbons. Henry pointed out landmarks as they rode, a distinctive rock formation shaped like a sleeping bear, an ancient pine tree split by lightning but still standing, defiant against the elements. Around midday, they stopped to rest in the shade of a small grove of aspens. While Henry tended to the horse, Zara unwrapped Martha's package to find 2 slices of apple cake, carefully wrapped in cloth. "She must have baked it last night after we went to bed," Zara said, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. She offered 1 piece to Henry, who accepted it with a grateful nod. As they ate in companionable silence, Zara found herself studying Henry's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the faint scar that ran along his temple, the way the sun brought out golden highlights in his brown hair. He was handsome in a rugged, weathered way, his face etched with lines that spoke of both laughter and hardship. "How did you become a cowboy?" she asked suddenly, curious about the man who had so unexpectedly entered her life. Henry finished his cake before answering, brushing crumbs from his fingers. "Wasn't always one," he admitted. "Grew up back east in Pennsylvania. My father owned a small factory making boots, expected me to take over the business someday." "What happened?" Zara prompted when he fell silent. A shadow crossed his face. "War happened. I enlisted in '61, came home in '65 to find the factory burned, my parents dead from fever, and nothing left for me there." His tone was matter-of-fact, but Zara could sense the pain beneath the simple words. "Headed west after that. Figured I'd rather work under the sky than rebuild walls that only reminded me of what was lost." "I'm sorry," Zara said softly, understanding all too well the ache of having one's foundations ripped away. Henry shrugged, but his eyes when they met hers were filled with a compassion born of shared suffering. "Life has a way of changing course when we least expect it," he said. "The trick is learning to ride the new current instead of drowning while looking for the old one." They resumed their journey, the conversation shifting to lighter topics: Zara's childhood adventures in the mercantile store, Henry's tales of cattle drives, and the characters he'd met along the trail. By late afternoon, a comfortable rhythm had developed between them, the initial wariness giving way to something that, if not quite friendship, was at least a mutual respect. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the land, Henry guided them off the main trail and into a secluded hollow where a small stream provided fresh water. "We'll camp here tonight," he announced, dismounting and helping Zara down. "Should reach Willow Springs by mid-morning tomorrow." The reality of their impending separation hit Zara with unexpected force. In the short time they had traveled together, Henry had become a fixed point in her suddenly chaotic world, a source of stability and safety she had come to rely on more than she cared to admit. "This friend of yours," she said as they set up camp, "you're sure he'll have work for me?" Henry nodded, arranging kindling for a fire. "Jesse is always short-handed, especially with calving season approaching. He's got a housekeeper already widow named Mrs. Porter, but she could use help with the cooking and cleaning for the ranch hands. And he won't mind taking in a stranger. A woman with no references, no history he can verify." Henry struck a match, the small flame dancing in the growing dusk before catching on the kindling. "Jesse Ward judges folks by what they do, not where they've been," he said, feeding the growing fire carefully. "He gave me a chance when I had nothing but the clothes on my back and a bad case of the shakes that first winter after the war. He'll do the same for you." Zara wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this unknown man in this unknown place would offer her the sanctuary she so desperately needed. But experience had taught her that kindness often came with hidden costs. "And after?" she asked quietly. "What happens after calving season when he doesn't need the extra help?" Henry looked up, his face half illuminated by the growing flames. "One day at a time, Zara," he said gently. "That's all any of us can do." They ate a simple dinner of the provisions Silas and Martha had provided, supplemented by coffee Henry brewed strong and black. The night grew cool quickly, the fire providing a welcome circle of warmth as stars began to appear overhead, countless pinpricks of light in the vast darkness. "It's beautiful," Zara murmured, gazing upward. "I never really looked at the stars in town. Too many buildings, too many lamps." "One of the best things about the open country," Henry agreed, following her gaze. "Makes a man feel small, but in a good way. Reminds you that your troubles, however big they seem, are just a tiny part of something much larger." "Is that comforting to you?" Zara asked, genuinely curious. "I think I'd find it frightening to be so insignificant." Henry considered this. "Not insignificant," he said finally. "Just part of something. Connected, I guess. Like those stars up there, each one separate, but together they make patterns, constellations." He pointed upward. "See there, that's the Big Dipper. And if you follow those two stars at the end, they point to the North Star." "My father taught me that," Zara said softly. "He said as long as I could find the North Star, I'd never be truly lost. Smart man, your father. He was." Tears pricked at Zara's eyes, the grief still raw and immediate. "He deserved better than to die in the street like a dog." Henry's expression hardened. "Thornton will answer for that someday," he said quietly. "Men like him always do eventually." "I wanted to kill him," Zara admitted, the words barely audible over the crackling fire. "After my father. I took Papa's gun and thought about finding Thornton and putting a bullet in his black heart." "What stopped you?" Zara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the fire's warmth. Cowardice, maybe, or self-preservation. I knew I wouldn't make it out alive if I tried. She looked up, meeting Henry's steady gaze across the flames. "Does that make me weak?" "No," Henry said firmly. "It makes you smart. Revenge is a poor companion on the trail, Zara. It'll drain the life from you faster than any bullet. You sound like you know from experience." Henry was quiet for a long moment, his eyes reflecting the dancing flames. "After the war, I hunted down the man who burned my father's factory," he said finally. "Took me nearly a year to find him. He was living in St. Louis, had a new business, a wife, 2 little girls." He poked at the fire, sending sparks spiraling upward. "I watched him for 3 days, gun in my coat, vengeance in my heart." "Did you kill him?" Zara asked, barely breathing. Henry shook his head. "I couldn't do it. Not because I forgave him, I didn't, still don't. But because killing him wouldn't bring my parents back, wouldn't rebuild the factory, wouldn't heal what the war broke inside me." He met her eyes again. "All it would do is put another ghost in my dreams, and I had enough of those already." The weight of his words settled between them, heavy with shared understanding. Zara had never met anyone who seemed to comprehend her pain so completely, who could articulate the conflict within her heart with such clarity. "How do you do it?" she asked. "How do you keep going when everything's been taken from you?" Henry's smile was sad but genuine. "One foot in front of the other," he said simply. "One day at a time, and eventually you find new things to live for." "Have you found new things?" The question hung in the air between them, intimate and revealing. For a moment, Zara thought he might not answer, but then Henry's gaze softened as it met hers across the fire. "I'm starting to," he said quietly. Morning dawned bright and clear, the air crisp with the promise of approaching autumn. Zara woke to find Henry already up, tending the fire and brewing coffee. He nodded in greeting but didn't speak, and Zara was grateful for the silence, her mind still processing their conversation from the night before. They broke camp efficiently, falling into an easy routine that belied the short time they had traveled together. As they mounted up for the final leg of their journey to Willow Springs, Zara found herself dreading their arrival, not eager for the new beginning it represented, but reluctant to end the strange, suspended time she had spent in Henry's company. "Tell me about Jesse Ward," she said as they rode, hoping to distract herself from the odd melancholy that had settled over her. "How did you meet him?" Henry adjusted his hat against the morning sun. "Stumbled onto his property half dead in the winter of '66, he said. "I'd been drifting, taking odd jobs, drinking too much when the memories got bad. Got caught in a blizzard, lost my horse, nearly lost my life." He paused, remembering. "Jesse found me, brought me to the ranch, nursed me back to health even though I was nothing but trouble those first few months." "He sounds like a good man." "The best I've known," Henry agreed. "Taught me to work cattle, to break horses, to be useful again when I'd forgotten how. Never asked questions about where I'd been or what I'd done. Just gave me work and a place to sleep and left the rest to time." "And you've worked for him ever since?" Henry shook his head. "I come and go. Work the big cattle drives in the spring and fall, help out at Willow Springs between times. Jesse understands my need to keep moving." "Is that what you'll do after you leave me there?" Zara asked, trying to keep her tone neutral. "Move on to the next drive." There was a pause before Henry answered, so slight Zara almost thought she'd imagined it. "That was the plan," he said finally. "The Triple R is starting a drive to Cheyenne next week. They could use an experienced hand." Something in his tone made Zara press further. "And now? Is that still the plan?" Henry didn't answer immediately, and Zara couldn't see his face to read his expression. When he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. "Plans can change." The trail widened as they crested a hill, and suddenly the valley opened before them. Below, nestled against the backdrop of pine-covered mountains, lay a sprawling ranch. Fields of golden grass stretched to the horizon, dotted with cattle. A cluster of buildings formed the heart of the property, a large main house, a bunkhouse, barns, and corrals where horses milled about in the morning light. "Willow Springs," Henry announced, reining in to let Zara take in the view. Home to the best horseflesh in 3 territories, and some of the finest cattle this side of the Rockies. It was beautiful, Zara had to admit. Peaceful in a way Silver Creek had never been, with its constant bustle and competing interests. Here, everything seemed to work in harmony with the land rather than against it. As they descended into the valley, a figure emerged from one of the barns, shading his eyes against the sun as he watched their approach. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with silver threading his dark hair and beard. When they drew closer, Zara could see the lines of laughter etched around eyes that missed nothing. "Henry Rowe," the man called, his voice carrying easily across the distance. "Thought you'd be halfway to Wyoming by now." Henry dismounted, extending his hand to help Zara down. "Change of plans, Jesse," he said as the older man approached. "Found myself with a detour." Jesse's keen eyes took in Zara, her borrowed clothes, her wary stance, the fatigue that no amount of rest had fully erased from her features. But his smile was warm and genuine as he extended a weathered hand. "Jesse Ward," he introduced himself. "Welcome to Willow Springs, Miss." "Keller," Zara supplied, taking his hand. "Zara Keller, thank you for having me. Any friend of Henry's is welcome here," Jesse said, echoing Martha's words from days earlier. He turned to Henry with a raised eyebrow. "Though I suspect there's a story here that might benefit from telling over a hot meal and something stronger than coffee." Henry nodded, his expression serious. "Zara needs a safe place, Jesse, and work if you have it." Understanding dawned in the older man's eyes. "Trouble?" "The Thornton kind," Henry confirmed grimly. Jesse's jaw tightened. "Say no more. Come on, both of you. Mrs. Porter will have breakfast waiting and you can tell me what you need." As they walked toward the main house, Jesse leading the way with Henry's horse in tow, Zara felt a strange mixture of relief and apprehension. Relief at having reached this sanctuary Henry had promised, apprehension at what would come next for her, and for the quiet cowboy who had become, against all odds, her protector and friend. The main house at Willow Springs was larger than Zara had expected, a 2-story structure built of solid timber, with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides and windows that gleamed in the morning light. Inside, it was equally impressive, with polished wooden floors, sturdy furniture built for comfort rather than show, and walls adorned with paintings of the surrounding landscape. Mrs. Porter, the housekeeper, proved to be a formidable woman in her 50s with iron-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and sharp eyes that missed nothing. But beneath the stern exterior, Zara quickly discovered a kind heart and practical mind. "You'll stay in the room at the top of the stairs," she informed Zara after breakfast, during which Jesse had listened to a carefully edited version of recent events. "It has its own washstand and a view of the mountains. I'll find you some proper clothes, can't have you working in men's trousers, though I'll grant they're practical enough for riding." Work, it seemed, would begin immediately. Willow Springs housed not only Jesse and Mrs. Porter but also a rotating crew of ranch hands currently numbering 8 who lived in the bunkhouse, but took their meals in the main house's large kitchen. Preparing those meals, keeping the house clean and handling the laundry for Jesse, and occasionally the hands was a considerable task. One Mrs. Porter had been managing alone since the previous helper had left to get married 3 months earlier. I'm not much of a cook, Zara admitted as Mrs. Porter showed her the kitchen, a spacious room dominated by a massive cast iron stove and a table large enough to seat a dozen men. Can you follow directions and work hard? The older woman asked bluntly. Yes, madam. Then you'll learn. Start by peeling those potatoes. We've got hungry men to feed at noon. Henry and Jessie had disappeared after breakfast, heading to the barns to discuss ranch business, leaving Zara to settle into her new role. As she worked alongside Mrs. Porter, learning the rhythms of the kitchen and the housekeeper's expectations, Zara found herself wondering what would happen when Henry left. The thought created an unexpected hollow feeling in her chest, which she quickly tried to dismiss as mere anxiety about being left alone in yet another new situation. Midday brought the ranch hands in for dinner, the main meal of the day. They were a diverse group, ranging from grizzled veterans of the range to young men barely out of boyhood, all with healthy appetites and a respectful wariness of Mrs. Porter that bordered on fear. Henry ate with them, seated at Jessia's right hand at the head of the table. He spoke little, but Zara noticed how the other men deferred to him, seeking his opinion on matters of horses and cattle with a respect that suggested his reputation extended beyond his friendship with Jessie. After the meal, as Zara helped clear the table, one of the younger hands lingered, his hat in his hands and a hopeful expression on his freckled face. "Miss Keller," he began, his voice cracking slightly. "I just wanted to say that was the best apple pie I've had since my mama's." Zara smiled, surprised and pleased by the compliment. "Thank you, Mr. Cooper, Madam Tommy Cooper." He ducked his head, cheeks reddening. "Anyway, I just wanted to say welcome to Willow Springs." From the doorway, Henry watched the exchange, his expression unreadable. When Zara glanced his way, he nodded once, then turned to follow Jessie outside. The afternoon passed quickly, filled with the numerous tasks required to keep the ranch house running smoothly. By evening, Zara was exhausted but satisfied in a way she hadn't been since before her father's death. Physical labor, she discovered, provided a respite from grief and worry, allowing her to focus on immediate concerns rather than the uncertain future. After the evening meal, as the hands retreated to the bunkhouse, and Mrs. Porter to her quarters off the kitchen, Jessie invited Zara and Henry to join him on the porch. The night was clear, stars emerging one by one as darkness settled over the valley. "Henry tells me you're a quick learner," Jessie remarked, settling into a rocking chair with a glass of whiskey. "Mrs. Porter says the same." "They're both too kind," Zara demurred, though the praise warmed her. "Neither of them is known for unwarranted kindness," Jessie chuckled, "so I'll take their word for it." He sipped his whiskey, regarding her thoughtfully. "The position is yours for as long as you want it, Miss Keller. Room, board, and fair wages. No questions asked about your past, though I expect honesty in all dealings moving forward." Relief flooded through Zara. "Thank you, Mr. Ward. I promise I'll earn my keep." "Jessie, please." He set his glass down. "Now, there's the matter of your safety. Henry mentioned Thornton." Zara tensed at the name. "He's not likely to follow me this far," she said, hoping it was true. "He got what he wanted, my father's business, our property." "Men like Thornton don't stop wanting," Henry said quietly from where he leaned against the porch rail, his profile outlined against the darkening sky. "And they don't like loose ends." Jessie nodded grimly. "Henry's right. It might be worth sending a wire to some contacts I have. See what Thornton's up to these days." "You have contacts in Silver Creek?" Zara asked, surprised. "I have contacts most places worth having them," Jessie replied with a slight smile. "When you've been in the cattle business as long as I have, you learn the value of information." He rose, stretching. "I'll ride into town tomorrow, send those wires." In the meantime, Miss Keller, consider Willow Springs your sanctuary. No harm will come to you here." After Jessie had bid them good night and retired inside, Zara and Henry remained on the porch, the silence between them comfortable yet charged with unspoken words. "When will you leave for the cattle drive?" Zara finally asked, voicing the question that had been weighing on her mind all day. Henry was quiet for so long that Zara thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice was low, almost hesitant. "I'm not sure I will." Zara's heart gave a peculiar leap. "Oh," Henry turned to face her, his expression serious in the dim light. "Jessie has asked me to stay on, help train some new horses he's bought. Says he needs someone with my experience. And will you stay? I'm considering it." He moved closer, leaning against the porch rail near her chair. "I've been on the move a long time, Zara. Maybe it's time to see what staying in one place feels like." The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken but unmistakable. Zara found herself holding her breath, afraid to acknowledge the flutter of hope in her chest. "I think," she said carefully, "that would be a fine thing to discover." Henry's smile in the darkness was brief but genuine. "We should get some rest," he said, straightening. "Tomorrow comes early on a ranch." As they moved toward the door, Henry paused, his hand lightly touching Zara's arm. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I'm glad I found you by that creek." Zara looked up at him, finding in his eyes the same mixture of vulnerability and strength that she felt within herself. "So am I," she whispered. In the days that followed, Zara settled into life at Willow Springs with surprising ease. The work was hard but satisfying, the routine providing structure to days that had once been chaotic with grief and fear. Mrs. Porter proved to be a patient teacher, instructing Zara in the arts of cooking, baking, and managing a household the size of Jessie's with efficiency and economy. Henry remained at the ranch, working with Jessie's new horses and helping prepare for the upcoming calving season. Zara saw him primarily at mealtimes, their interactions brief but increasingly comfortable, each developing a subtle awareness of the other's presence that didn't go unnoticed by the observant Mrs. Porter or Jessie himself. A week after their arrival, Jessie returned from town with news. "Thornton's been asking questions," he reported grimly over dinner, after the hands had departed and only he, Henry, and Zara remained at the table. "Seems he's put out word he's looking for a young woman matching your description, Miss Keller. Claims you stole from him before fleeing." Zara's heart sank. "I took nothing that wasn't already mine," she said fiercely, "and precious little of that at that." "No one who knows Thornton will believe his claims," Henry assured her, "but it's concerning that he's still looking." Jessie nodded. "My contact says Thornton's been expanding his interests, buying up more businesses, more land. He's got ambitions beyond Silver Creek." "Political ambitions," Henry guessed. "He's always fancied himself a future governor." "And a missing woman who could contradict his version of events would be inconvenient for such ambitions," Jessie concluded. Zara felt cold despite the warm kitchen. "What should I do?" Jessie and Henry exchanged glances. "For now, stay close to the ranch," Jessie advised. "Thornton doesn't know you're here, and I aim to keep it that way. My men are loyal, they won't talk to strangers asking questions." "And if he does find out," Zara pressed. Henry's expression hardened. "Then he'll have to go through me to get to you," he said simply. The matter-of-fact declaration sent an unexpected warmth through Zara, tempering her fear with something that felt dangerously like hope. As autumn deepened, painting the surrounding hills in shades of gold and crimson, life at Willow Springs fell into a pleasant rhythm. Zara's skills in the kitchen improved under Mrs. Porter's tutelage, and she found herself taking on more responsibilities, freeing the older woman for other tasks. The ranch hands, initially wary of the newcomer, gradually accepted her presence, particularly after she mastered the art of baking pies that rivaled even Mrs. Porter's legendary offerings. Henry, too, seemed to be settling in, his restless energy channeled into the work of the ranch. He spent his days training horses, mending fences, and helping Jessie plan for the winter ahead. In the evenings, he often joined Zara on the porch after dinner, their conversations growing deeper, more personal as trust developed between them. "I never thought I'd find peace again after my father died," Zara admitted one crisp evening as they watched the sun set behind the mountains. "I was so angry, so afraid." Henry nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Grief changes a person," he said quietly. "It's like a river cutting through stone. It carves new channels, creates a different landscape." "Is that what the war did to you?" Zara asked, sensing an opening to a subject Henry rarely discussed. He was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "The war, my parents' deaths, the years after all of it shaped me," he finally said. "There were times I didn't recognize myself anymore, times I wondered if there was anything left worth salvaging." His eyes, when they met hers, held a vulnerability Zara had never seen before, until recently. The implication hung between them, neither quite ready to give it voice but both acutely aware of its presence. As October waned, bringing the first hint of winter's chill, Jessie announced plans for the annual harvest dance in town, a tradition that brought together ranchers, farmers, and townspeople from miles around to celebrate the season's bounty before the isolation of winter set in. "You'll come, of course," he informed Zara and Henry over breakfast. "The whole ranch attends. It's good for morale, and it keeps the men from getting restless before winter properly sets in." Zara hesitated, anxiety flickering through her at the thought of venturing into town, where strangers might ask questions she couldn't answer. "I'm not sure that's wise, given Thornton's reach doesn't extend to Piney Creek," Jessie assured her. "And you can't hide on the ranch forever, my dear. Life must be lived, even in the shadow of danger." Henry, who had been quietly eating his breakfast, looked up. "I'll stay with her," he said simply. "Make sure she's safe." The dance was to be held at the town hall in Piney Creek, a growing settlement about an hour's ride from Willow Springs. As the day approached, a flurry of activity overtook. The ranch boots were polished, shirts mended, and in the case of the younger hands, elaborate preparations made in hopes of impressing the local girls. Mrs. Porter, seeing Zara's anxiety about attending, took matters into her own hands. "You can't go to your first dance in the territory wearing work clothes," she declared, producing a dress from her own trunk. "This was my daughter's before she moved east with her husband. It should fit you well enough with a few adjustments." The dress was lovely, a deep blue calico with a fitted bodice and full skirt, modest but flattering. As Mrs. Porter helped her try it on, making small adjustments with pins and needle, Zara found herself unexpectedly emotional. "It's been so long since I wore anything but morning clothes or work dresses," she explained when Mrs. Porter questioned her shining eyes. "My father would be happy to see me in something pretty again. He always said life was for living." The older woman patted her hand. "Wise man, your father. And he'd be proud of you. I think building a new life from the ashes of the old, that takes courage." On the evening of the dance, Zara found herself uncharacteristically nervous as she dressed. Mrs. Porter had arranged her hair in a style more elaborate than her usual practical braid, with soft tendrils framing her face. The blue dress, expertly altered, fit perfectly, emphasizing her slender waist and bringing out the color in her eyes. "You'll do, Mrs. Porter pronounced, surveying her handiwork with satisfaction. "Now go on down. They're waiting for you." Henry and Jessie were in the front room, both dressed in their best clean shirts, polished boots, and in Jessie's case, a brocade vest that had clearly seen better days but still retained an air of dignified elegance. When Zara appeared at the foot of the stairs, both men turned, and for a moment the room was absolutely still. It was Jessie who broke the silence, stepping forward with a gallant bow. "Miss Keller, you are a vision, the belle of the ball without question." But it was Henry's reaction that caught and held Zara's attention. He stood motionless, his eyes never leaving her face, an expression of such naked admiration and something deeper, something that made her heart skip a beat, transforming his features. "You look beautiful," he said simply, the words carrying more weight than any elaborate compliment could have. The ride to town was filled with laughter and anticipation, the ranch hands whooping and racing each other on the wide trail, their spirits high with the promise of music, dancing, and female company. Zara rode in Jessie's buggy with Mrs. Porter, while Henry followed on horseback, never far from the vehicle. Piney Creek proved to be larger than Zara had expected, a proper town with a main street lined with businesses, a church, a school, and several side streets of neat homes. The town hall, at the center of it all, was ablaze with light, lanterns hanging from the eaves and music spilling from the open doors. Inside, the hall had been transformed with harvest decorations, dried corn husks, pumpkins, and autumn leaves arranged with simple but effective artistry. A small band played at one end, while tables laden with food and drink lined the other. The floor was already crowded with couples dancing to a lively tune. Zara felt a momentary panic as they entered, the press of strangers and the noise overwhelming after weeks of the ranch's relative quiet. But then Henry was beside her, his steady presence calming. "Would you care to dance?" he asked, offering his arm. "I'm not sure I remember how," Zara admitted, suddenly shy. Henry smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face. "Neither do I," he confessed. "We can remember together." The first dance was awkward, both of them rusty and overly careful of stepping on each other's toes. But as the music continued and they relaxed into the rhythm, something shifted. Henry's hand at her waist felt natural, right. The space between them seemed charged with unspoken words, with possibilities that had been growing since that first meeting by the creek. "I never thanked you properly," Zara said as they moved across the floor. "For finding me that day, for bringing me to Willow Springs. You saved my life, Henry." "You were saving yourself," he countered. "I just provided directions." "No," Zara insisted, meeting his gaze steadily. "It was more than that. You really saw me when I was at my lowest, and you didn't look away." Henry's hand tightened slightly at her waist. "I couldn't have looked away if I'd tried," he admitted, his voice low. "From the moment I saw you by that creek, something in me recognized something in you, like I'd been waiting to find you without knowing it." The honesty of his words stole Zara's breath. Before she could respond, however, the music ended, and Jessie appeared at their side, claiming Zara for the next dance. As the evening progressed, Zara found herself passed from partner to partner. Jessie, several of the ranch hands, and even the town's mayor, who welcomed her to Piney Creek with genuine warmth. But her eyes constantly sought Henry, finding him watching her from the edge of the dance floor, his gaze a tangible connection even across the crowded room. During a brief respite from dancing, Zara stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. The night was clear and cold, stars brilliant in the vast sky above. She wrapped her shawl more tightly around her shoulders, savoring the quiet after the noise and heat of the hall. "Too crowded in there for you." She turned to find Henry approaching, 2 cups of punch in his hands. He offered one to her, which she accepted gratefully. "Just needed a moment," she explained. "It's been a long time since I was around so many people." Henry nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Takes some getting used to again," he agreed. "After the war, I couldn't stand crowds. Too many people, too much noise, too many ways for things to go wrong." And now he considered the question. "Better," he said finally. "Not perfect, but better, especially with the right company." Zara felt a blush rise to her cheeks, visible even in the dim light from the hall's windows. "I'm enjoying the evening more than I expected to," she admitted. "It feels normal, like I'm allowed to be happy again even after everything." "You are," Henry said firmly. "Your father would want that for you, Zara, to live to find joy again." "And what about you?" she asked, the question that had been growing in her heart finally finding voice. "What do you want, Henry?" He set his cup down on the porch rail, his movements deliberate. When he turned to face her, his expression was open, vulnerable in a way she had never seen before. "For the longest time, I didn't know," he said quietly. "I was just existing, moving from place to place, job to job, never staying long enough to put down roots, to risk caring too much." He took a step closer, close enough that Zara could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cool night air. "But lately, I've been thinking that maybe roots aren't such a terrible thing, that maybe there are some things worth risking everything for." Zara's heart thundered in her chest, hope and fear warring within her. "Things like what?" Henry's hand came up slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and gently tucked a stray curl behind her ear. "Like a future," he murmured. "Like a home. Like you." The world seemed to still around them, the music and laughter from inside fading to a distant hum as Zara looked up into Henry's eyes and saw reflected there the same longing, the same tentative hope that had been growing in her own heart. "I'm not whole," she whispered. "I'm still broken in places, still afraid." "So am I," Henry acknowledged. "But maybe we can be broken together. Maybe we can help each other find the pieces we've lost." Zara stepped closer, eliminating the space between them. "I'd like that," she said softly. "Very much." When Henry's lips met hers, gentle and questioning at first, then with growing certainty, Zara felt something within her shift and settle, like a key turning in a lock, opening a door she had thought forever closed. The kiss was a beginning of healing, of hope, of a future neither of them had dared to imagine when fate had brought them together by a creek where Zara's tears had marked the end of one life and the unexpected beginning of another. Winter came to Willow Springs with a ferocity that Zara, accustomed to the milder climate of Silver Creek, found both beautiful and terrifying. Snow blanketed the valley, transforming the landscape into a world of white and blue shadows, while temperatures plummeted to levels that made even the hardiest ranch hands hurry between buildings rather than linger outdoors. Life on the ranch adapted to the season's demands. The cattle were moved to sheltered pastures closer to the main buildings. The horses required extra care and feeding, and the rhythm of days changed to accommodate the shortened daylight hours. Inside the main house, the focus shifted to indoor tasks, mending harnesses and tack, taking inventory of supplies, planning for the spring planting. For Zara and Henry, the winter months brought a deepening of the connection that had begun at the harvest dance. Their courtship progressed slowly, respectfully, under the benevolent but watchful eyes of Jessie and Mrs. Porter. There were shared meals and conversations by the fire, sleigh rides when the weather permitted, and stolen moments of privacy that became increasingly precious to them both. "I never expected to find love again," Zara confessed one evening as they sat together in the parlor after the others had retired, the crackle of the fire the only sound in the quiet house. "After my father died, I thought that part of my life was over, that I'd never have a family again. Henry's arm tightened around her shoulders. I felt the same way after the war, he admitted, like that capacity had been burned out of me, along with so much else. His fingers gently traced patterns on her arm. You brought it back to life, Zara. You reminded me that there are things in this world worth fighting for, worth staying for. In January, when the snow lay deep around the ranch and the mountains disappeared for days at a time behind curtains of white, Jesse received a telegram from his contact in Silver Creek. The news was troubling. Thornton had expanded his reach, forming alliances with powerful men in the territorial capital. There were whispers of corruption, of bribes and threats used to secure his position. And he was still asking questions about Zara, still seeking the woman who had escaped his grasp. He won't give up, Zara said quietly when Jesse shared the news. Not until he's certain I can't threaten him. Then we make sure you're never in a position where he can reach you, Henry said firmly. Willow Springs is your home now. We protect our own. The word home resonated within Zara, filling a void she had carried since fleeing Silver Creek. In the months since her arrival, the ranch had indeed become more than just a sanctuary. It had become a place of belonging, of purpose, of connection. As winter gradually loosened its grip on the land, giving way to the tentative green of early spring, life at Willow Springs grew busier. Calving season arrived, bringing with it long days and sometimes longer nights as the ranch hands, including Henry, worked tirelessly to ensure the safe delivery and survival of each new calf. Zara and Mrs. Porter kept the kitchen running around the clock, providing hot meals and coffee to the exhausted men whenever they staggered in from the fields. It was during this time, when the ranch was at its most vulnerable and attentions diverted by the demands of new life, that the past Zara had been fleeing finally caught up with her. She was in the kitchen garden, taking advantage of a mild day to check which herbs had survived the winter, when she heard the sound of approaching horses. Visitors weren't unusual at Willow Springs, but something about the steady, deliberate pace of these riders raised the hairs on the back of Zara's neck. Rising from her kneeling position, she shaded her eyes against the spring sunshine and felt her heart stutter in her chest. 3 riders were approaching the main house, and even at a distance, she recognized the man in the lead, Sheriff Dawson from Silver Creek, Thornton's right-hand man and the officer who had arrested her father on false charges. Panic froze her in place for a crucial moment before instinct took over. Gathering her skirts, Zara fled toward the barn where she knew Henry and several of the hands were working with a difficult birth. But she had been seen. A shout went up behind her, followed by the sound of hooves accelerating. Henry. She called as she reached the barn door, her voice high with fear. Henry, they're here. Inside, heads snapped up from where several men knelt beside a laboring heifer. Henry was on his feet instantly, his expression changing from concern to cold determination as he took in Zara's terror and the sound of approaching riders. Get her to the back room, he ordered one of the younger hands. Tyler, ride for Jesse, he's at the north pasture. The rest of you with me. The next few minutes passed in a blur for Zara, as she was hurried to a small tack room at the rear of the barn. The door closed firmly behind her with instructions to stay hidden. Through cracks in the wooden walls, she could see Henry and 3 of the ranch hands step outside to meet the approaching lawman and his deputies. Sheriff, Henry's voice carried clearly to where Zara huddled. What brings you to Willow Springs? Sheriff Dawson dismounted, his hand resting casually near his gun belt. Looking for a fugitive, he said, his tone deceptively pleasant. Young woman, dark hair, green eyes. Name of Zara Keller, wanted for theft and obstruction of justice back in Silver Creek. He glanced around, taking in the ranch buildings. We have reason to believe she might be hiding out in these parts." "This is a working cattle ranch, Sheriff," Henry replied evenly. "We don't make a habit of harboring criminals. But you're welcome to speak with Mr. Ward when he returns. He owns the property." Dawson's smile didn't reach his eyes. "That's mighty hospitable of you, Mr. Rowe, Henry Rowe." Recognition flickered across the sheriff's face. "Rowe, I've heard that name before. You had some trouble with Mayor Thornton a few years back, didn't you?" Henry's stance shifted subtly, a coiled readiness that Zara had never seen in him before. "Ancient history," he said dismissively. "The mayor and I came to an understanding. Did you now?" Dawson's eyes narrowed. "Funny coincidence, you being here when we're looking for the Keller girl, especially since witnesses saw a man matching your description helping her after she fled town." The tension in the yard was palpable, even from Zara's hidden vantage point. The ranch hands had spread out slightly, positioning themselves strategically, while the deputies' hands hovered near their weapons. "I'd suggest you wait for Mr. Ward," Henry said, his voice deceptively calm. "Or come back with a proper warrant if you want to search the property." For a long, tense moment, it seemed the confrontation might escalate into violence. Then the sound of approaching riders broke the standoff. Jesse returning with Tyler and several more hands. The arrival of reinforcements shifted the balance of power, and Sheriff Dawson, after a tense exchange with Jesse, reluctantly agreed to leave, promising to return with the necessary paperwork. As the lawman rode away, Zara emerged from her hiding place, trembling with the aftermath of fear and adrenaline. "They'll be back," she said, looking from Jesse to Henry. "With more men with warrants. Thornton won't stop." Jesse's expression was grim but resolute. "Then we need to make sure they have nothing to find when they return," he said. "It's time to end this once and for all." That night, after the ranch had settled into an uneasy quiet, Jesse, Henry, and Zara gathered in Jesse's office to form a plan. Mrs. Porter joined them, her practical mind a valuable asset in the crisis. "Thornton's reach is growing," Jesse began, spreading out a map of the territory on his desk. "My contacts say he's aiming for a position on the territorial council, first step toward the governor's office. Your testimony about what really happened to your father could derail those ambitions." Zara nodded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "But it would be my word against his a respectable businessman and politician versus a woman accused of theft." "Not necessarily," Henry interjected. "Not if we can find others he's wronged who are willing to speak out, not if we can find proof of his corruption." Jesse tapped the map thoughtfully. "I've been keeping track of Thornton's activities for years," he admitted. "Ever since he tried to force me to sell some land to him back in '71. There's a pattern to his acquisitions: properties obtained through foreclosures, sudden deaths, accusations of wrongdoing that force owners to sell at a fraction of the true value." "You think there's a paper trail?" Mrs. Porter asked, practical as always. "There always is," Jesse confirmed. "The trick is finding it and finding witnesses willing to testify against him." As the night deepened, a plan began to take shape. Jesse would use his extensive network of contacts to gather evidence of Thornton's corrupt practices, while Henry would secretly return to Silver Creek to locate potential witnesses and retrieve any documents that might still exist in the town records. "It's too dangerous," Zara protested when Henry outlined his role. "Thornton knows your face now. If he catches you, he won't," Henry assured her, though the confidence in his voice didn't quite reach his eyes. "I know how to move without being seen when I need to. And what about me?" Zara asked. "I can't stay here and put everyone at risk when Dawson returns with his warrant." It was Mrs. Porter who provided the solution. "My sister lives in Denver," she said. Runs a respectable boarding house for young women. You could stay with her while this plays out. You'd be safe there, and far from Thornton's immediate reach. The plan was set in motion with remarkable speed. By dawn, Zara was prepared for travel, a small valise containing her few possessions packed and ready. Jessie would accompany her to Denver personally, ensuring her safe arrival at Mrs. Porter's sister's establishment, while Henry would make his way to Silver Creek by a circuitous route to avoid detection. The parting was brief but emotional. The courtyard of Willow Springs bathed in the pale light of early morning as Henry held Zara close. "Be careful," she whispered against his chest. "Don't take unnecessary risks." Henry's arms tightened around her. "I'll find what we need," he promised. "And then I'll come for you." He drew back slightly, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that took her breath away. "When this is over, Zara Keller, I want to give you a proper life, a home, a future, if you'll have me." Tears blurred Zara's vision as she reached up to touch his face, memorizing the feel of him beneath her fingers. "I will," she said simply. "I will." Their kiss was brief but fierce, a promise and a prayer combined. Then Henry was helping her into Jessie's buggy, his hand lingering on hers until the last possible moment before the horses pulled away, carrying her towards safety and temporary separation from the man who had become the center of her world. Denver was a city unlike any Zara had experienced before, bustling, growing, filled with a diversity of people and purposes that made Silver Creek seem provincial by comparison. Mrs. Porter's sister, Martha Daniels, proved to be cut from the same practical cloth as her sibling, running her boarding house with firm efficiency but genuine care for the young women under her roof. Zara was introduced as a niece from back east, come west for her health, a story vague enough to discourage questions, but plausible enough to satisfy curiosity. The other boarders, mostly shop girls and schoolteachers, welcomed her warmly, and Zara found herself adapting to city life with surprising ease. But always, her thoughts returned to Henry and to Willow Springs. Jessie, before departing back to the ranch, promised to send word as soon as there were developments. The waiting, Zara discovered, was its own particular form of torture. 2 weeks passed with agonizing slowness. Zara filled her days helping Martha with the boarding house, exploring Denver under the chaperonage of one of the other young women, and reading voraciously from Martha's small but eclectic library. At night, she lay awake worrying about Henry, imagining all the things that could go wrong in Silver Creek, all the ways Thornton might hurt him if he was discovered. The telegram, when it finally arrived, was brief to the point of frustration. "Evidence secured. Stop returning to Willow Springs. Stop all well. Stop Jessie." Martha, seeing Zara's mingled relief and frustration, patted her hand sympathetically. "Men never do tell you everything in these messages," she observed. "Too expensive by the word, they say, but I think they just don't understand what details matter to a woman's peace of mind." 3 more days passed before a second telegram arrived, this one sending Zara's heart racing. "Come home. Stop. Meet Denver Station tomorrow noon. Stop Henry." Home. The word resonated within her like a bell, clear and true. Willow Springs had become home in a way she had never expected when Henry had first found her crying by the creek, lost and alone. And now, whatever had happened in Silver Creek, it was safe for her to return. The train station was crowded at noon the following day, travelers coming and going in a constant flow of humanity. Zara, dressed in her best, the blue dress from the harvest dance, carefully preserved, scanned the platforms anxiously, searching for the familiar tall figure among the strangers. She almost missed him. His hat was pulled low and he stood half turned away, watching the incoming train rather than the crowd. But then he shifted, and Zara would have known the set of those shoulders, the stance of that man anywhere. Henry. He turned at her call, and the smile that broke across his face was like sunrise after the longest night. In moments, she was in his arms, propriety forgotten as he lifted her off her feet in an embrace that spoke of relief and longing and joy all mingled together. "You're safe," she breathed, her hands framing his face as he set her down. "You're really safe." Henry's eyes, warm as honey in the midday light, never left hers. "I am," he confirmed. "And so are you truly now. It's over, Zara. Thornton can't hurt you anymore." The story came out in pieces as they traveled back to Willow Springs by train, and then by Jessia's buggy, which was waiting at the station nearest the ranch. Henry had indeed found evidence of Thornton's corruption ledgers showing bribes paid to officials, records of fraudulent transactions, and most damning of all, a witness willing to testify that Thornton had ordered the shooting of Zara Keller. "The deputy who actually fired the shot," Henry explained as they rode through the greening countryside, spring now in full bloom around them. "He was young, impressionable. Thornton convinced him your father was reaching for a weapon, but he's been living with the guilt ever since. When I found him, he was ready to talk, more than ready. The evidence and testimony had been presented to the territorial governor himself, bypassing the local authorities that Thornton had corrupted. The resulting investigation had been swift and thorough, leading to Thornton's arrest on multiple charges of corruption, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison," Henry concluded. "And his associates are scrambling to save themselves by offering more evidence against him. The whole rotten structure is collapsing." Relief washed over Zara in waves, almost too vast to comprehend. "My father," she said softly, "he has justice now." Henry's hand covered hers where it rested on the seat between them. "Yes," he agreed, "and you have your freedom. Your name has been cleared completely. The governor himself signed the document." As Willow Springs came into view, bathed in the golden light of late afternoon, Zara felt a sense of homecoming so profound it brought tears to her eyes. Jessie was waiting on the porch, Mrs. Porter beside him, both smiling broadly as the buggy approached. The ranch hands gathered in the yard, calling out welcomes and good-natured teasing as Henry helped Zara down. But it was what happened next that truly took her breath away. As the greetings subsided, and the hands began to disperse back to their duties, Henry retained her hand in his, turning to face her with an expression so full of love and certainty that Zara felt her heart might burst from the sheer joy of it. "Zara Keller," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden hush that fell over the yard. "When I found you by that creek, I told you that you didn't owe anyone your strength. What I didn't say then, what I couldn't have known, was how much strength you would give me in return." He dropped to one knee, still holding her hand, and from his pocket produced a small circle of gold, simple but beautifully crafted. "I love you," he said, the words straightforward and true. "I want to spend the rest of my life with you, building something real and good here at Willow Springs. Will you marry me?" Zara was aware of the audience around them, of Jessia's broad grin, of Mrs. Porter's suspiciously bright eyes, of the ranch hands' encouraging murmurs. But in that moment, the world narrowed to just her and Henry, to the question hanging between them and the answer that rose from her heart with absolute certainty. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Yes, Henry Rowe, I will marry you." The wedding took place in June, when Willow Springs was at its most beautiful, the valley lush with new growth and wildflowers carpeting the meadows. It was a simple ceremony held under the great willow tree that gave the ranch its name, with Jesse officiating. One of the perks of being a county magistrate, he explained with a wink, and the entire ranch in attendance. Zara wore a dress of creamy satin that Mrs. Porter and Martha had secretly worked on during her stay in Denver, with lace at the collar and cuffs that had once adorned Martha's own wedding gown. Henry, nearly unrecognizable in a new suit, waited for her beneath the willow's swaying branches, his face transformed by a joy so pure it brought tears to the eyes of even the most hardened ranch hands. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, promises to love and cherish, to stand together through whatever life might bring, to build a home and a future on the foundation of the love that had begun by a creek where tears had marked an ending but also, unknowingly, a beginning. As Jesse pronounced them husband and wife, and Henry's lips met hers in their first kiss as a married couple, Zara felt the final pieces of her broken heart knit together, stronger now at the mended places than they had ever been before. The celebration that followed lasted well into the night, with food and drink, and dancing in the ranch yard under strings of lanterns that glowed like earthbound stars. As the evening deepened, and the newly-wed couple prepared to slip away to the small cabin Jesse had gifted them as a wedding present, Zara found herself overwhelmed by the journey that had brought her to this moment. "What are you thinking?" Henry asked softly as they stood at the edge of the gathering, his arm around her waist and his eyes reflecting the lantern light. Zara looked up at him, at the man who had found her at her lowest point and seen not weakness but strength, who had offered help without demanding anything in return, who had become the center of her world in ways she had never imagined possible. "I'm thinking about that day by the creek," she admitted. "How lost I was, how certain that my life was over." She reached up to touch his face, marveling that this man was now her husband. "And I'm thinking how grateful I am that you were the one who found me there." Henry's smile was tender as he drew her closer. "I think perhaps we found each other," he murmured against her hair. "Two broken souls who needed mending." As they made their way to their new home, under a sky brilliant with stars and filled with the promise of all the days to come, Zara knew with absolute certainty that they had indeed found in each other exactly what they both had needed, not just healing for the past, but hope for the future, and a love strong enough to weather whatever storms life might still bring. And it had all begun with a chance encounter by a creek, with tears and compassion, and with simple words that had changed everything. "You don't owe anyone your strength."